Hello, and welcome to episode 81 of Things I've Learned from Barry Harris. And today I thought we would discuss a very common chord for guitar players and probably piano players also. It's this chord. It's this we would call C9. So it's got a C in it, an E in it, a B flat in it. So there's your root third, flat 7. But then it also has a D natural in it. So there's your 9th, and then it's got a G in it, so there's your 5th. So that's a beautiful chord. Play it all the time. But what I found for myself was I would only play that chord, and then if I tried to invert that chord, because it's a 5-note chord, so it's hard to invert, which means if you just move each note up to the next degree of those 5 notes, you get some interesting shapes, but they're not really shapes that I was able to get in my hands so well that I would want to play them all the time, and from other chords. But studying Barry's method, then I started to see what he talks about, which is this C9. He doesn't think of this as C9. He thinks of this as the highest 4 notes. He thinks of as G minor 6 with a C in the bass. So really that C9 chord, this one specific chord, now if you think about it as G minor 6, as a Barry person you say, okay, so now we know Barry doesn't look at a chord like, oh, here's this one group of notes. That's good. Okay, here's this next group of notes. He sees those group of notes as being part of a scale, which means it's all movable. So if you take this chord and you see it as G minor 6, that means if you know your G minor 6 diminished scale, let's say we just played in drop 2s, it's really beautiful. So now it gives you some options of sounds that you may have never done before. So for example, instead of just playing C9, let's say if we were doing a blues in C, so you got C for a measure, F for a measure, then back to C for 2 measures, C7 for 2 measures, or C9 for 2 measures. So here's what it would sound like. Now, every guitar player has played that in one way, shape, or form. But now if you think of it as, well, wait a second, that C9 is actually G minor 6. So I can go crazy on all my G minor 6 things that I know how to do. So let's just say if I just did a couple, I did that for C9 instead of just playing this. So let's see what that sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sounds nice. Pretty sound. Totally different than what most people play. Totally different. Then if you look at C9 is G minor 6, that means using the same idea. F9, instead of being F9, would actually be C minor 6, but with the F in the bass. So you can do exactly the same thing that you just did for G minor 6. Let's say if we do it for C minor 6. Which is really pretty. So let's see what that sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's really pretty. And then maybe again the G. So it's pretty. So let's play the first couple bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. Really pretty. Now that's thinking of, instead of that C9 to F9, you're thinking G minor 6 diminished to C minor 6 diminished back to G minor 6 diminished. Now, that was just playing drop 2s. But also, what is a chord that people always play? The C9, and then sometimes they'll add this, they'll call it 13, right? But as Barry people, if we think of this as, we don't think of this as 13. We just think of, here's G minor 6, here's a diminished, so there's our note. So we think of it as one borrowed note from G minor 6. So if we could play one borrowed note, we could play several borrowed notes. So let's, instead of just playing this one, let's also play this one, which would be F sharp. So then I'll say, so wait, let's do that. 1, 2, 3. So that time, when I went back, I played C, and instead I played G minor 6. F9, I played C minor 6, then back to C. Then I did two things. I played G minor 6, but then I played C's tritone, which is F sharp 7. And F sharp 7, also I used the same principle where I used, instead of playing F sharp 9, I used D flat minor 6. But I'm trying to just use the same kind of things for each one so you can hear it. But do you see, now it gives us a huge variety of things that we can play. Whereas if you just look at it, a chord and just say, well, I can play inversions of that chord. True, definitely true. But when you see a chord as being part of a scale of chords, it frees you up in such an unbelievable way. And then the only limitations you have are how quickly you can see those scales of chords on your instrument. So it does a few things. It changes the way you think about things. It changes how you hear things, because now all of a sudden you're playing different chords over a C. A G minor 6 over a C has a different sound, has a beautiful sound. But it also then makes you say, oh, okay, so I don't see my drop 2s that well in minor 6s. Or I don't see my, let's say if I just wanted to do, now we're just doing parallel motion, but you could also do oblique motion where one note stays and other note moves, but that one note stays. Or we could do contrary motion where a note moves in one direction, another note moves in another direction. And you can test yourself and see if you know it that well. So these are all things that blossom out of just the one idea of saying, instead of C9, I'm going to think of this as G minor 6, which means I think of it as G minor 6 diminished. So now you have all of these things now that you can do over every time you were going to play that one chord. I mean, I think it's limitless. So this is another thing that I feel like Barry's thing does, or Barry's scale systems do, which is it takes something that is a lot of times limiting and it branches it out and it makes it almost limitless. I mean, I can't think of any limitations on it from that point of view when you start to really think of it that way. Because if you think about all the different ways we need to practice G minor 6, let's just say, oh, that's, you know, you have, even if you just do, if you do G minor 6 in thirds, if you do G minor 6 in triads, if you do G minor 6 in, let's see, broken drop 2 chords, if you do G minor 6 in octave chords, and then the last one, if you do G minor 6 in drop 2s like we were doing, if you do G minor 6 in drop 3s, if you do G minor 6 in drop 2, drop 4, I mean, so you see all the different things that you have to know with just G minor 6. Now you multiply that by all the different options you have when you're playing a C9 in a blues, and you have a certain tempo that you have to be able to play it at. That's going to make you practice things and do things in a way that you never thought you would do before. It's really, it's the more I'm discovering more about this myself, the more I want to share, because it's so freeing. And in the end, that's probably what we want to be when we're playing music, is we want to be free. So, all right, this is just a little short lesson in discussing not to think of it as C9 anymore, but maybe to think of it as G minor 6. Anyway, until next time, thanks.